down to the lower level so the kids could see him jump up and down on strings.
Today, Nick and Nina are delighted by George's success, but there was a time when Nick had strong reservations about his son's career choice.
The weird thing about show business is there is no set formula.
I really do think it's one of those examples of like cream rising to the top, that even in Drek, like people liked George and liked his work and remembered him.
When George came, it was like, well, why not, you know?
It was just very apparent that this was a very talented guy and that was known out there.
You're gonna win tonight?
Yeah, don't you? Sure. No, I don't think I have a shot in hell.
Before George Clooney made his move to Hollywood, he was one of many seniors at Augusta High School in Kentucky. But even then, he had dreams of fame.
He would try out different signatures all the time, and he would say, now, Mr. Case, keep these because I'm going to be famous someday.
In addition to Nick and Rosemary Clooney, another strong influence on George was his cousin Miguel Ferrer, who by this time was making his living as an actor.
I know that as an actor, not just as a person, but as an actor, George looked to Miguel. And Miguel is very, very similar to George in personality, in that he's just incredibly quick, incredibly witty, very funny, really smart. I mean, you just really saw the respect that George had for Miguel.
When Miguel and his father, Jose Ferrer, came to Kentucky to shoot a feature, George went to interview his cousin for a local news show. Instead, he landed his first role in the never-released film, Winning Colors.
I will second that emotion.
Somebody yelled action. That was the end of George.
Despite having introduced George to show business, Nick Clooney tried to discourage his son from pursuing an acting career.
I told him it was the dumbest thing I'd ever heard in my life. I said, please, George, how many actors have you seen waiting tables, parking cars? And they're wonderful. They're talented and they're attractive, and you've seen them. And he said, no, Pop, I'm going to do this. And so he got an old car of ours. They called the Danger car. He got in that car and drove to California, and that was that.
I moved to L.A. from Kentucky when I was 21 to be an actor. That was like in 1982. And I, for 2 years, and it sounds like that's nothing. At the time, of course, it seemed like an eternity. But for 2 years, I rode a bike to auditions and slept on the floor of a closet.
With nowhere else to stay, George moved in with his famous Aunt Rosemary.
Rosemary, I don't think, was at all happy with George becoming an actor. As she said herself, she was married to a man who was one of the finest actors of his generation, and she'd seen him being rejected. She'd seen him be turned down for parts that were not worthy of him.
I lived with her when I first moved out to Los Angeles to be an actor 12, 13 years ago. And we would get in an argument about something I'm sure was my fault. And then she would walk up on stage, it was at the Hollywood Bowl, and she would sing, and it would take your breath away, and you could no longer be angry with her.
Rosemary often had good reason for being frustrated with George. Their agreement was that George could stay with his aunt and cousins in exchange for working as a handyman around the house, a role George had little interest in playing.
On one occasion, he had to paint a fence, and straight out of Tom Sawyer, he cut corners of his own. He only painted those parts of the fence which Rosemary could see from a window.
But I made the mistake of walking out toward the tennis court. Then I saw the other side of the fence. There was no white paint on the other side. It's just wood, just plain old wood.
With no job and few prospects, Nick Clooney thought it might be time for his son to reconsider his options and go back to college.
I said, George, you'll have that piece of paper, that diploma to fall back on. He said a remarkable thing for a young kid. He said, Pop, if I have something to fall back on, I'll fall back.
After a string of unremarkable parts in TV pilots, George finally landed a job as a regular on the sitcom The Facts of Life.
I just wanted to wish you girls luck, see if you need any help.
Oh, actually, you can hand out a few circulars. He was just so happy to get Facts of Life. I remember the first thing he told me that he did was he paid his rent for a year. He was just so excited about that.
All right, single file, please, people. Keep it tight. I don't want to have to get out of it.
Where do you keep getting these people?
Garage sale.
George joined the cast at a really great moment. There was a lot of X chromosomes around. We needed a Y. We needed a Y really bad. and he was the best guy we could ask for.
In 1990, the Clooney family lost one of its guiding lights. Uncle George Guilfoyle became terminally ill with cancer. George returned to Kentucky and was with his hero when he died.
From Uncle George, George learned a lot about being a man in the acceptable sense of being decent and doing the right thing. That is to say, you were supposed to be upright, you were supposed to tell the truth, you were supposed to take care of those who needed taken care of.